Start.
Just reach Meridian and
Fire now.
Be Meridian. If there's still active shooting, we'll take the Bearcat, head that way.
39. Upper Sioux, it's going to be Locust Grove and U-Stick, and they just put out a shot flyer, just, on the route.
This is the 1032 podcast, where we interview experts in firearms and training with law enforcement, military, and competitive shooting backgrounds. We're here another episode of the 1032 podcast, and I have Jim Gorges. Is that the way you say your last name?
That's close enough. Gorges is how it's pronounced.
Gorges?
It's German.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get just a little bit closer to the mic there. All right. So, Jim, we are in Green Creek. Is this even like a town here, or is this just a road, Green Creek, Idaho?
It's a poor excuse for a town. So it's got a church and 4 houses.
All right.
How's
So this is a unincorporated area, right?
That's right.
So what's the closest town we are to here?
Cottonwood.
Cottonwood. All right. So we are kind of north, I guess, kind of north central, or what do they consider this?
North Central, yeah. Right in the middle of the large part of the Panhandle, so North Central, yeah.
And we're not too far away from Hell's Canyon.
That's right.
The Salmon River, all that stuff's pretty close by here, isn't it?
Lochtaw, yep.
Yeah,
River
so
No Return, all
we're
that
in
stuff.
some of the best hunting areas in the country right
all
here.
the good stuff, man's right here. Yeah.
So do you hunt a lot?
No, because I don't have time because I'm doing this, but I like it.
But if you want to hunt, this is probably not a good place to tell your friends about.
No, not at all. Yeah, I outfitted for years, and we have a lot of no-telling cricks here. Yeah.
So what is it that keeps you so busy? And you're a retired police officer, law enforcement officer. Did you work as a city cop or just sheriff's deputy?
Short time as a city cop in my career, but most of the time was deputy. That's my thing, man.
Okay.
County work.
So tell us briefly about your background as a law enforcement officer.
Started in Montana doing some reserve work, search and rescue, got into law enforcement there. Ended up just hooking up a job in southern Idaho for Ketchum PD back in the early 90s. And then from there I went to Blaine County Sheriff's Office and did some work on their SWAT team there and patrol, part-time SWAT team, and then transferred up to, well, I didn't transfer, I resigned and came up here for family reasons and spent, about 18, 20 years of my career in Idaho County.
And it was most of your career in patrol? Did you work detectives or what?
Patrol, part-time SWAT patrol, and firearms. Got into firearms in southern Idaho, so I was a firearms guy. And then most of the time after that, then for the last 12 years was in administration. So I was under sheriff, and so I was in a small county, still doing a lot of patrol work, but doing admin.
So how many years
work.
total did you do in law enforcement?
25, I believe, is
25
what I did.
years.
I took an early retirement. Yeah.
And how is retirement?
Retirement is extremely busy and fun. People ask me if I miss it, and I say, yes, I do. I do miss it, but there's parts of it that I don't. And, I'm getting older now, but, man, we had a lot of good times, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah.
It's made me who I am now, and I look at the world differently. I think we all do after we get out of law enforcement. Like, it's not the same world if you haven't been in law enforcement. So, yeah.
Yeah. So you say that you're super busy. What are you busy doing, being that you're retired now?
Running this business, we started a firearms training business 10 years ago, part-time. And I was a little bit skeptical of retiring and going full-time. But it's like a kid. The more you feed it, the more it grows.
Yeah. So
and it just took off.
Do you want to say the name of your business? Or?
Yeah, American Freedom Defense Firearms Training, AFD, known in short as AFD. And we train civilians, law enforcement here. 3 to 5 classes a week. We go all winter long. We don't shut down anymore, and we have a store. So all of that stuff keeps me busy. And there's a lot of different paths in business. So I love it.
Well, you guys are doing 3 to 5 classes a week, huh?
Yep.
Wow, that's pretty busy.
That's pretty busy. Some of those are 2-hour classes, so keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, still, you got to be here.
But you know what it is, when you do a class, there's 4 times that much work prior to the class. So,
yeah, a 2-hour class is a 4-hour class, and a 6-hour class is an 8-hour class, right?
That's how it works, yeah.
I saw a meme once of a guy cleaning guns and, has a bunch of equipment all over the place. And it says, everyone wants to be a firearms instructor until it's time to do firearms instructor stuff.
Man, you got that right.
Right? Because a lot of times it's not the shooting, it's the setting up, it's the tearing down, the cleaning up, right? All the setup.
And the lesson plans, and yeah, I'm telling you, man, you hit the nail on the head. People have no idea.
Yeah.
And they want to do it until they get in the spotlight and they don't see all the work. They show up on class day and say, hey, do you need any help? No, I don't need any help now. The work was done last week prior to the class starting.
Yep.
Class day's fun day.
Yeah. But so were you a firearms instructor when you were in law enforcement as well? Were you teaching within the agency?
Yeah. We did everything for our agency. We were in a small agency, so I did all I was the lead instructor for our agency and did some SWAT stuff. And then I suppose I was I was instructor for 18 years, I guess, out of that.
What got you going down that road?
Just a gun guy, man. I don't know. I'm a pretty simple thinker, and I've always said I like firearms. I like gun stuff. I like tactics. It's very simple. I get it. I understand it, and it's not real technical. I'm not a really technical guy, and it's challenging, and I like challenging stuff. I don't know how particularly good I am at it, but I tend to like things I'm not good at, and I try to get better at them.
So being that you were a firearms instructor, you worked patrol, you were, at the bottom of the totem pole, and later on in your career, you went into administration. You were the undersheriff of the county you were working for, right?
That's correct, yep.
So looking back, what do you think overall of law enforcement training as far as quality and quantity?
Both of those are short, quality and quantity. We've got budget issues in small agencies, and both of those are short. I'm exposed to way more training than I was now, which is sad. And I'll tell you another thing is civilians train way more than law enforcement do, at least in medium to small agencies, because they want to do it. And they're not doing 16 different things. In small agencies, you're doing DUIs and detectives, and you're working late, and you got to stay late and do paperwork, and now your wife's mad at you because you haven't been home, and the water heater broke, and you got all this stuff going on, and so you're squeezing in firearms. In the civilian world, they tend to do it because they love it, and it's entertainment. And I haven't been introduced to the competition world just until recently, and I really struggle with that. But competition shooters they're fun to work with. They do it because they love it, and they actually train more than most law enforcement guys I know, unless you're a SWAT guy.
Yeah.
They actually train more.
Why do you think law enforcement guys who are working don't see the firearms training as a bigger priority?
I think there's two answers to that. One of them is that they're just busy. They just got a lot of different stuff going on. And another answer to that, and this isn't everybody, but I think some guys just don't have their head in the game. It's not a priority. In a medium to small size agencies, you'll go through an entire career not getting a shooting. So then that builds complacency. So how important is that now on the priority list? And it gets to be not important to them because they haven't drawn their gun on a call for years. And now they stop. And we don't get to train for that day, right? We get to train for that day, but once that day comes, you don't get to go back and get more training. The tools you take to that gunfight are the tools you have to fight with. But we lose sight of that, I think, in small agencies when we're doing so many different things. In Idaho County, we're chasing horses. We're doing search and rescue more than we're doing anything else. And none of that has to do anything with gun stuff. Mm-hmm. So it just gets to be a nuisance. We did, for years, I did training, free training, paid overtime, and we'd have the same 6 guys show up every month. Mm-hmm. Every month. The rest of the guys would show up when we would make them show up and threaten them with their patrol job. If you don't qualify, you're going to be behind a desk. Mm-hmm. And then and only then would they come and shoot. And they put their gun back in their holster until 6 months later when we made them do it again.
So how hard is it as an administrator to come up with the funding to be able to train officers?
There's a lot of layers to that. With rural county guys, it can depend on how well you get along with the commissioners. There's a lot of other funding. Most of the county funds go to trash. It has nothing to do with guns. Yeah. So now you got to get people on board. You got to get buy-in from the county. So it can be very difficult. And I'm sympathetic to that side too. It could be hard to get the funding. But as you know,
doesn't the sheriff's department get their own individual budget?
They do get their own individual budget.
And then if you have like, I say, I've never been an administrator, but let's say as the sheriff or the undersheriff, you have 10 priorities. Can the training be moved up and down that priority list?
Yep, and that's exactly what we did, is we moved it up in our priority list. Now, not everybody agrees with that, so that's going to come with some criticism, right? Detectives maybe aren't going to like that so much.
Yeah.
White-collar crime guys maybe aren't going to like that so much. They want the latest computer gizmo to read a phone or whatever. So.
Yeah. So what kind of things do you think guys that were in your position, you know, talking to administrators, what kind of things do you think that they can do to build to get better training, or at least training more often for their guys?
I think it comes down to camaraderie. If you can do something else other than just go to the range and then leave, if you could build camaraderie and make it fun and start to build a team, I think that's why SWAT teams had such a good bond, because they're out there doing it. You know, you've heard that guys on the combat arena, they have a better relationship with their buddy than they do, or a different relationship than they do with their own spouse. Why is that? Because you're working together. So you got to have that. I think you got to build that camaraderie, and you got to make it fun, not just stand on the line and punch paper, and you've got to make it interesting, and you got to build that mental aspect of it. You know, I think mental, and I learned this from Colonel Grossman, is the mental aspect of that is you got to have the three things, right? The equipment, the skills, and then the mental capacity. And if you're missing that mental capacity, man, you're missing the boat. So that's got to be in there. And that seems to be something that even the wives understand when you get into that, right?
Yeah.
Even the wives understand that. Even the people at home that are upset because now you're off going and doing training on your day off, they seem to connect with that, and they seem to get the importance of that. So
Yeah, I feel like my wife, she definitely saw that. If
Yeah.
I was out training, she understood, hey, you need to be trained to a certain level so that you can come back home.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to, this podcast, I interview a lot of guys who have been involved in shootings, officer-involved shootings during their career, and we're going to talk about one that you were involved in. But before we do that, let's talk about why I was here today. What did we do today?
Yeah. So, I met you, a couple years ago. I
Yeah.
went down to Boise for my instructor recert. I still hold an instructor certificate through the academy. And, I saw this red dot class, which I've been struggling with, and I went down to that. And your training got me out of my comfort zone, which I like. And then I went down for your performance pistol class. So from that, I wanted to have you come up here. We got a lot of things going on, and I really appreciate you coming up. So with you coming up here to our facility to do training and invite local law enforcement, we don't have a lot of options. We're right in the middle of a dead zone here, right, in Idaho. There's not a lot of stuff around here. Coeur d'Alene is 3.5 hours, and Boise is 4.5 hours. And so anyway, coming up to do this and to receive training, and not only training, but training that pushes you out of your comfort zone, is something I would say I'm addicted to now. Like, I'm addicted to doing drills that I can't do.
Yeah.
I like that. I love it. I love it and I hate it at the same time.
So-
because it makes me feel bad and it keeps me
Yeah.
up at night when I can't do them.
Yeah.
But I want to continue to try to do it.
So just
And,
briefly talk about what you experienced today and your perspective in the class.
Yeah. So the perspective today is
What'd you
one
learn?
One of the things that you told us, Ro, today was the experimental phase of shooting. Allow yourself to miss. And I never heard that before in my entire career in law enforcement. Missing was bad voodoo. But to allow yourself to miss means that you're working outside your comfort zone. And that's the experimental phase. And with that experimental phase, we need to identify that's the experimental side. And you need to do that. And you also need to come back and throttle it back and get your hits within your comfort zone. That comfort zone will keep going up, 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 but only if you train in that experimental phase and try to do drills and accomplish things that you're not capable of. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, man, I appreciate being exposed to that when I went down to Boise. And since I took your class down there, I can't get enough of it. That's why you saw today, guys today, Rob and Marcus. That's why I started shooting with those guys. Why do I like shooting with those? You'd think I'd like shooting with guys that are not as good as me, but I don't. If If you want to get better, you train with guys better than you.
For sure.
And those guys are dynamite. You saw them shooting today.
Oh, yeah, those guys are good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had some good shooters in the class.
And if I can try to keep up with those guys, now I'll get better. And I have to start trying to figure out what's keeping me from getting better. And your training forced me to try to figure that out instead of just being happy where I'm at. If I just shoot with people not as good as me, I look like a hot shot and I feel like a hot shot and I sleep really good at night, but I'm not getting any better.
Yeah. So one of the things, kind of the main points of the class, you know, besides doing some of the drills that we did is, right, we watched the videos of body cam footage of several officer involved shootings, and we see how fast it happens. Guys are, you know, mag dumping, they're, you know, minimum 6-7 rounds, and they're shooting as fast as they can, they're moving, and then we asked the class, hey, when you guys are going to your training, your quarterly training or monthly training, whatever you guys go to, is the speed in which these guys are shooting, is that the same speed in which you guys are shooting in your training? And everybody says absolutely not. And I'm like, so if that's kind of what we're seeing out there with officers, you know, they're drawing and shooting as fast as humanly possible, why are we not training like that? Right?
Yeah.
And so we have such a low hit factor as law enforcement nationwide. And I think the reason why is because we are training, you know, in what I call qualification speed. And then guys are involved in shooting, and now they're shooting twice as fast as they were during qualification. So we need to go out and try to replicate that type of speed until we can get accurate, you know, acceptable accuracy at that speed.
Yep. And you brought up a good point this morning. If we've never trained at that level and we get in a gunfight tomorrow, how do you think that's going to go for you if you've never done it before? Mm-hmm. Try to pick up a guitar and play it and you've never done it before. It's not going to go well.
Yeah.
And neither is gunfighting if you haven't trained that way.
Yeah, because all the body cam footage we saw, nobody was shooting at qualification speed, right?
No.
So we got to get, and that's where I think that using USPSA hit factor scoring really helps, right? Because it's your points divided by your time gives you a hit factor, which is points per second or hits per second.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you responsible for your speed or lack thereof, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to have the speed with the accuracy. You can't really favor one over the other. We got to have both.
Both, yeah.
So that's what I really
But I think
love
that
about
experimental phase for guys like me who are used to training slow, because that's all we ever had to do, will help us break out of that and help us realize, hey, this is possible. The first time I went down to Boise to one of your classes and one of the drills, I mean, I looked at you like you had two heads. You want me to do what in 2 seconds? I couldn't even wrap my head around it. But by the end of the day, it was within striking distance.
Yeah.
And we're using that stuff here at AFD, and we're getting people to realize that they can do it. They've just never tried it before.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, good. I'm glad it'll be a good influence for you then.
oh yeah, absolutely.
At least shooting. I don't know about other things. Probably bad influence, other stuff.
Yeah. We'll just keep it with shooting. That'd be our relationship for now. We'll build on it slowly.
All right. Let's get into the incident that I came up here to interview about. Most of the shootings I interview guys about, they happen when they're in uniform responding to a call for service. And yours was different.
It was different.
All
Very
right.
different, yeah.
So kind of tell us about your day leading up to that incident.
All right. Well, I had went down. This happened. So the location, Kamei, Idaho. People say it doesn't happen around here. That's not true. So Kamei, Idaho, 10 miles outside of that.
Yeah, and just not to interrupt you, but talking about small towns, right?
Yeah.
There was just a shooting in Boise this morning where a couple of IDOC officers got ambushed after leaving the emergency room where they had an inmate in there, and they were heading back. They got ambushed as they were leaving, and they had somebody out there helping this guy escape. The guy escaped, and now we're looking at the guy's possibly near this area.
Yep.
So this stuff happens.
go.
Doesn't matter if it's a large city that you're in or a small town. Shootings happen.
They do.
Right?
They do happen. And you can't pick the time, place, or the skill level of your opponent when they do happen. You don't get that choice, right? And so there goes back to training, right? You need to be trained for that unknown. But yeah, so this happened outside of Kamei. Kamei is 1,100 people in the town. This was 10 miles outside of that, up in the sticks, like no neighbors. Kind of on what most people would call a Forest Service road, but it's a county road. But it looks like a Forest Service road up in the woods. But of that day leading up to that, I had taken the kids. My kids at the time were 5 and 7. Dakota's 5. Dawson was 7 years old at the time. And we'd went down to Kamiah grocery store or something. On the way home, I was getting sick. I could tell. I'm like, man, I'm getting the flu, right? Like, this is not going well. So, kids, we got to go. So we're headed home, and
So you're off duty with your kids.
yeah, off duty with the kids. Yep. And so we're headed home on the county road, and I see a car. And at the time, I just noticed it because I'm a cop, right? So I see a car parked on the side of the road with nobody in it, and I don't think too much of it, but I took notice. The guy that would later attack me in this story, that's his car, and he was out on foot at that time. This is at 4 o'clock. Shooting happened at 6, so 2 hours prior to that.
This is in the evening.
In the evening, yeah, still daylight. Yeah, but it's in December, so keep that in mind. So it gets dark, 6 o'clock or whatever, 5:30. And so we go on home, and we get home, and I'm like, man, I'm not feeling well. I got to take a nap. Now, I was scheduled to go on duty that night, but it wasn't my shift. I was covering for somebody. And in Idaho County at that time, we didn't have to go out. We could just cover calls from home. And
So that means you'd just be home with your radio on, and if dispatch called you over the radio, then
Yep.
you would leave.
Yep, and it was a Wednesday night.
So would you be in uniform?
Don't have to be. No, don't have to be in uniform. I wasn't. And I never usually was when I was on call, but I had my uniform to where I could throw it on if I needed it. So we get home 4 o'clock. I took a nap, and I woke up about 5:30, 5:40, somewhere in that area. So that's kind of the day, the day earlier in the day. It was just a normal day, out doing yard work, whatever. This is my Monday. It's actually supposed to be my weekend, but it turned into my Monday because I had to, cover for somebody else. So it's kind of like a day off, and turned into not a day off. I got a call, and I got to cover a shift from home. So Wednesday night, that's no big deal in Idaho County. You might go all night long and not get a call. So yeah, I'll cover a night shift. So that's what happened leading up to that day, man. It's just a normal day.
And what position were you in as far as, were you a regular deputy or were you in administration?
I was a corporal at that time, so just a deputy. Yeah, I was in a corporal position at that time. Yeah. And so I took a nap, and I got up, and I felt even worse. Had a fever, probably 98, 100, I don't know, fever. You know what a fever's like, right? Like, I did not feel well. And I had my sweats on, no shoes, moping around the house, debating whether I could even cover calls or not. And then that's when I hear the knock at the door. And just the knock at the door. That doesn't probably seem strange to a lot of people, but keep in mind, when you live out in the country, and you've been out there teaching us on the gravel all day long, right? When a car drives across it, you hear it. It's very loud.
Yeah.
There was none of that. There was only a knock at the door. And was that unusual? Not really. We have a lot of hunters and neighbors and things like that. And I actually thought to myself, it's probably Alfred. He's probably lost his cows again.
Is that like a neighbor?
That's
Alfred?
a neighbor, yeah.
And how close is your closest neighbor out there?
Probably quarter mile, half mile.
Okay.
And he runs cattle out in the woods, So I figured he lost his cows, stopped to get a flashlight, borrow a four-wheeler, whatever the case may be. That's who I actually thought it probably was. Yeah. But thanks to my trainers, and if I could say one thing if I forget, don't ever stop training. Like, don't stop training. Because of mostly Colonel Grossman, but others too, I don't answer the door without a gun in my hand because of the mental conditioning training. That's where it comes back to mental conditioning training. Like, to me at the time, and definitely now and ever since then, but me at the time, it was ludicrous to answer the door without a gun in my hand when I don't know who's on the other side of it.
I agree.
That's a crazy thought.
Yep.
Now, I've done that hundreds of times before, and it's Alfred wanting to borrow a four-wheeler. It's vacuum. It's, people selling Bibles, whatever the case may be, and it's behind my hip, and they never see it. Not like I answer the door with a gun in the face, right? We don't do that. I'm not an idiot. We put it behind my right hip because I'm right-handed, and I talk to them, and they never see the gun. That's how it has played out hundreds of times before. This night was different. So when I just reached up and opened the door with my left hand, as soon as that striker cleared or as soon as the bolt cleared the striker, when I turned that, he pushed in. The bad guy, Doug Woods, pushed the door in, and he's southpaw. He's left-handed, so he's got his little revolver in his left hand, and he said, "Get your effing hands up," was what I remember hearing, and he fired almost instantly. And I say almost instantly because I don't think he expected resistance as he came in. And as he came in, I took a step to the left, as people had taught me to do, and I came up to the retention position, also known in post of step 3 position, the retention position. And when I did that, I felt his round, hit my right forearm, and then I fired 2. They were almost simultaneously. Those 3 rounds were, they say, 91% of shootings are 2.5 seconds or less. This was about half of that, very fast. And so I came up to that retention position. The bullet went into my arm, grazed the bone, came back out of my arm, went through my daughter's wall and through her door and into my son's room, went through his door, lodged in the exterior wall of the house. I didn't know any of this at the time. The kids were in the same room as I was, 5 and 7 years old, watching TV. So they were 10 feet from where this happened. And it's a really good thing that they were, because his bullet, when it exited my arm, went through Dakota's wall. At the time, she spent a lot of time there with her toy box, so playing in her room, stuff like that. So anyway, they're in the same room. So shooting angles were good. I fired 2, hit him in the chest, hit him in the chin, and he went down face down. Almost fell on my daughter. Almost fell on Dakota.
So your daughter was at the door with you?
She was sitting on the floor watching the Polar Express, because it's December 5th, right?
Yeah.
So she's sitting on the floor with Dawson's right next to her, and they're watching TV. This is happening. It would be, if you're watching TV, this would be off to their right. So as kids are, they didn't hear the knock at the door, right? They spaced all that stuff out. Next thing they knew is 3 gunshots. His in my arm, and then my 2, and then this guy falling about 2 feet from where Dakota sat. Dawson was next to her. And I had trained with the kids when bad things happen, even at that age. You don't have to go into detail. Some people agree with that. They can agree or disagree. I don't know. But I said, if bad things happen and Dad's in a situation, get away from me. Just get away. That's what I want you to do. And man, I think that paid off, because that was the first thing they did. And maybe they were just running because they were scared kids. I don't know. But I told them to get down to the bathroom, which is in the back room. And they crawled back to the bathroom. That also came from Colonel Grossman, by the way. That when bad things happen to me, get out of the kill zone. And they took right off and hunkered. They covered themselves up with a blanket and stayed there, which was cool, because then they were out of the way. So he was down. I thought he was, I don't know what I thought, but he was unconscious. It was like a ton of bricks going down. He didn't move. Okay. So, and when I debriefed this, there were some mistakes I made, and this is going to be one of them right here. What I should have done is just went and covered him. I didn't do that. I actually went down because of all my training. What do you do when you arrest somebody? You search them and then you cuff them, right? You do a cursory search. That's what I did. I go down, I put my muzzle to the back of his neck, I cursory searched him, pulled his arms out, and my duty belt, which was hung by the door in case I ever needed it, had fallen off during the struggle. So I could actually reach that, and I got the cuffs, and I cuffed him. Now, I didn't need to do that at that time, and it wasn't a super good idea, in my opinion. I could have waited for support to get there, but regardless, I cuffed him. In the search, I found a machete. The revolver had fallen on the floor, tape recorder, audio recorder, some other stuff. He had makeshift body armor that he had made. He'd come in for a battle, leather, different flaps. He had camo clothes on, green camo clothes. So I was having a hard time getting through all that stuff, searching him, got him cuffed up, went to a position of cover. Because what I'm thinking, I don't know if everybody knows Idaho County very well, but there's a lot of what most people think of or call anti-government. So I'm thinking this is the beginning of the fight, not the end. So I moved to a position of cover where I can cover him and the door. The door's now open. And then he starts to move and groan, and he looks up and he looks right at me. And I said, get your head down Don't move. Spread your feet. He did exactly what I told him to do. I said, how many more are there? He said, I'm alone. I said, why did you come here? He said, it was just random. All right. He said, keep your chin tucked in toward your chest. Do not move. He did exactly what I told him to do from that point forward. I didn't believe that he was alone. I thought there were more coming. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm shooting a Glock Model 20, or 22, 40 caliber. I'm thinking to myself, I got 15 plus 2. And I fired 2. That leaves me 14. And my AR, guess where my AR is at? It's out in my patrol rig outside. And I wanted to
wishing you had it, huh?
I wanted to go get it so bad. That was my security blanket, but I knew better. And ever since that day, little side note, I carried my AR into my house every day after that day. And I've never needed it since, right? But that was another mistake. Like I left it out there. Now at the time, I got several ARs now, so they're in every corner. But at the time, I was working for the county, so I didn't have the money. I had one, right? So I wish I had that AR. So I'm covering the guy, and support shows up. Dan Drover with Tribal PD, also a friend of mine, showed up in 11 minutes, which was on dry, and it was icy, right? This is December 11th. And so he showed up in 11 minutes. It's usually a 20-minute response time from where he was, and he showed up. Cover came, they bandaged my arm, and they bandaged him, and they took us both to the same hospital. The plan of what he had planned to do, that they being the investigating agency, Idaho State Police, what they determined his plans were is to tie me up. That's why he said, get your effing hands up. Tie me up and cut the kids up. That's what the machete was for. Cut the kids up while I watch. He wanted me to watch. And this was all done because to teach us a lesson to not wage a war on drugs. Because he's the doper, right?
When you said teach us, teach
Law enforcement.
law enforcement.
Yeah. And he said those words as I was walking out. He looked up. He's now conscious when EMTs are working on him. And he said, that'll teach you to wage a war on drugs. So that was his whole purpose. Now, for us normal thinking human beings, that's ludicrous, right? To attack somebody and cut up kids alive because of your pot smoking. He was a pot smoker. That's what he smoked, a lot of pot. Not even meth.
Just marijuana.
Just marijuana, right? But we're not on the same plan or the same plane, rather, as reality of people that do these kinds of things. I think that's what, before law enforcement, and then we can help the civilian world out as we train them, they think, how could somebody do such a thing? They're not on the same reality plane as we are. So they're not thinking rationally. And it doesn't matter, at that point in time, it doesn't matter why they think it. It doesn't matter how they think it. As you taught us today on the range, we need to fight fast and accurate, like our life depends on it, because it does. All that other psychological stuff can be worked out afterwards. There's people that do psychological stuff, right? They're like, well, you're a gunfighter, but, we need to get to the mental. Yes, we do need to get to the mental aspect, but that's before the gunfight. That's not during the gunfight. So stop judging me for my actions because the gunfight's happening now, right? Psychologists like to do that. And mental illness in Idaho, our system is not great. I found out as undersheriff, as being an administrator. And that's very important.
Doesn't Idaho have one of the higher suicide rates in the country?
It does, yeah. And there's not a lot of structure to deal with that. And it's very important. So I'm not arguing on that point. All I'm saying is when it's time for a gunfight, do what your trainers trained you to do. And I did exactly. When they talk about, oh, that stuff doesn't work, I hear people say that stuff doesn't work. That is all a bunch of crap. What you do in training is what you're going to do in a gunfight. Like that's just, it was like, Raul, it was like I stood over in the corner and watched myself do it almost. Like it was all autopilot. When they talk about muscle memory, neural pathways, all that stuff, it was all autopilot. Did I see my gun? No, because I was in the retention position. Did I have any conscious thought involved? No, not till the gunfight was over.
So you mentioned the retention position again, and you said that's the number 3 position. So we're talking about you draw the gun out of your holster, the holster that's on your belt. If you're right-handed, it'd be on your right-hand side. Yeah. As you go down with your right hand and reach for that, you bring it up to like your rib cage, and you're aiming it towards your target and keeping it at your rib cage retention position. And so that is so that you're keeping it at your rib cage so that people cannot grab a hold of it so easily.
That's right.
Correct?
Yeah, I'm old school, so the lock and rock position, as
Yeah.
the old guys taught me, right? And so we call that the number 3. I think they might have switched it to 5. I don't know. There's lots of different things that we still call it number 6 because I'm an old guy, or number 3 out of the 6, right? 6-step draw.
So you're home with your kids. It's just a normal day. You have your 2 children at home. There's a knock at the door. You go to the door with a handgun, and as you approached the door, where was your gun at the time?
Behind my right hip,
Behind your right hip.
out of view from anybody that's going to answer the door.
And so as soon as you open that, you hear, do you immediately focus on the gun, or do you focus on did you not see the gun?
I did see the gun, and I'm going to point out to Grossman again. Colonel Grossman talks about Kodak moment. My Kodak moment is, and this goes back to tunnel vision, is that revolver, and I can see the rounds, the lead round nose rounds in the cylinder. That gun was bigger than life.
So you were focused.
I was focused on that gun, man. Yeah, because that was a thing that was going to hurt me.
Yeah.
I guess that's why we do that, right? I'm not a psychologist, but that's why we do that.
And you're right-handed, correct?
And I'm right-handed.
And you were shot in your right arm,
Correct.
and you were able to pull the trigger even after being shot.
That's right. Yeah. Because again, goes back to training. What do we not do? We don't quit and we don't give up. Now, if he would have been using hollow points instead of full metal jacket, would that have shattered my arm? Maybe. Hopefully, I would have picked my gun up with my offhand and continued to fight, because that's what we train to do.
And
We'll never know the answer to that, but hopefully that's how that would have panned out.
Do you feel like you fired immediately, or do you feel like you hesitated to shoot?
I feel that I fired immediately when I connected the deadly force. I feel like it was pretty fast. The gunshots were that's about how close they were. Mm-hmm. Now, how long did he hesitate until he saw my gun? I don't know how long he had hesitated, because he would have had to close that OODA loop too, right, to see that gun, because he was going to tie me up. So he wasn't going to shoot me yet.
So
he was going to eventually, but he wasn't going to shoot me. So he had to process that he was meeting resistance at some point. And he still beat me to the first round. And that action versus reaction, very important point in training.
So you say OODA loop. We're talking about, explain that to the audience, for those of us who don't know, or I know what it is, but for those people who don't know what the OODA loop stands for.
Yeah,
That's
and this
observe, right?
Observe, orient, decide, and act. And also, another way to put it is the thought process cycle. There's a cycle that we have to do to go through a thought process, and we interrupt that cycle by whatever. I interrupted his thought process cycle because he had a plan. He had a very good plan to execute his objective. I interrupted that thought process. And so with that, I was able to buy some time back from the gunfight. But even with all that, it still amazes me, and he wasn't in the gunfighting business and I was, he still got the first round off. His gun went off before mine did, which means you have to fight through that stuff. Action versus reaction. We know reaction is slower than action. And we got to be, I think it's important to put stuff in our training that we mentally overcome that and don't think, oh, I've been shot, so I'm going to give up, because that's what happens in the movies, right? They blow themselves back and blow themselves off their feet. It doesn't work that way. We can still fight. And then the second thing is we've got to keep going, but we've got to overcome that reaction at some point. We've got to buy some time back from the gunfight at some point. So I was able to buy some time back, but he still got a round off. But if it wasn't for training, we're never going to know how that turned out. But I didn't look at my arm. I knew I'd been hit, and I felt the muzzle blast when he shot. And it was like being lightly hit in the forearm with maybe a baseball bat. Lightly. It didn't even hurt that bad at first. And I didn't look at it until I had him cuffed, and I went to a position of cover, and I'm holding him, and I'm looking down the slide of my Glock, and with a two-handed grip, I turned my gun platform to the side to look at my 2 holes, and they were just 2 clean holes in my arm that were starting to bleed a little bit. Vascular restriction.
So they didn't break any bone?
Didn't break any bone. No, my hand still worked fine.
That's good.
Yeah.
So how is it that Say he wanted to wage a war on law enforcement. How did he pick you?
They're not sure of that. Now, what they found a couple of things. They found an audio recorder and a video. So that he was going to video thing and audio tape the whole incident, right, when he was cutting the kids up. There's another theory out there, and they don't know this for sure, of why he chose me. Saw us in the grocery store. I'd never had any interaction with the guy. I'd never stopped him on traffic. State police had, but I
So
hadn't.
if he saw you in the grocery store, he didn't see you in uniform, though, because you were off duty.
Well, I was in the grocery store a lot in Idaho
Yeah,
County in
okay.
uniform, so possibly, yeah.
So he might have seen you previously in uniform.
Previously in uniform, yeah. Yeah, that's a possibility. So why he picked there, there's another theory that he was going to go down to Kuski to a cop's house, which is a town, small town, and he just got tired because he's out on foot, right? He had been out on foot for 2 hours, and he was wet. This is in December in Idaho. He was wet from the waist down. Maybe he was just cold and tired. At the time, I had a marked rig, patrol rig, sitting outside the door. But it would have had to be somebody else with kids because of his notes that they found. He was planning on cutting the kids up to push the point that we should stop the war on drugs, and bad things happen if you.
So
if
he
you
must
wage
have had a
war on
little bit of
drugs.
planning for him to plan, hey, I know he has 2 kids and I'm going to chop the kids up.
Yeah, he had a lot of planning involved. Yeah, and he had knee pads on. He had elbow pads on. He was ready, absolutely ready for a fight.
So he might have been planning this for days or weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And he had a lot of notes. So I would say weeks. But what he wasn't planning on is meeting resistance, because he, as a lot of people, watch too many movies. And he thought when you point a gun at somebody, they put their hands up and they say, oh my gosh, please don't hurt me. He doesn't live in the cop world. Like, that's not how we operate, right? So he wasn't planning on that. And that really interrupted his OODA loop. And so I think the victory here is, if I could put it on one thing, it's mental. It's that mental preparedness.
So do you carry your gun off duty?
I carried it at the time off duty all the time, and I carry it all the time now, of course, since then.
So
here's a
go
little,
ahead.
I don't know. Here's a little ironic thing. At the time, I came from Blaine County, a little bit bigger agency, and I was trying to, what I thought is, help my comrades up here about carrying a gun off duty. And many of them, things don't happen here. That's a pain. We're not going to carry our gun off duty. We don't do that here. I had so many guys call me and say, man, that thing has not left my body since that happened. And we just get complacent. And I'm not being critical of the guys. In small agencies, we get complacent. Idaho
I
County.
think big agencies as well.
Yeah, probably. In Idaho County, the average shooting about every 2 years somewhere in this area, in these 3 or 4 rural counties here. And so complacency happens. And, you know, there's more to this story of what he attacked our jailer in the hospital 2 months later. Mm-hmm. And there's a deputy from Lewis County, and his wife was 2 doors down getting ready to give birth to one of their kids. And there's a gunfight 3 doors down in St. Mary's Hospital.
With the same guy?
Same guy.
Another deputy got in a gunfight with him.
Yep.
Did he have a weapon, or did he try to take the officer's weapon?
He took our deputy's weapon off of his gun belt. We had to go. We could not hold him, right, in our jail because of conflict of interest. So Lewis County was holding him for us. When he would go to the hospital, we had to go as our responsibility and sit on him for security reasons. Our detention deputy went there, as this was the 3rd time he'd went to the hospital for the pain from the bullet wound. This is 2 months after my incident. He asked for painkillers, and 1 hour later, he asked to go to the bathroom. So our deputy uncuffed him from the bed. He goes to the bathroom. Woods came back to the bed, sit down. He reached down and pulled the gun out of his holster and pointed it at his forehead and pulled the trigger, and the gun went click. He had to fail to fire on the round. Now, after that gun went click, the fight was on. He was able to chamber another round, and bad guy fired 2 rounds. One hit the toilet, and the other hit the control panel for the bed. the guy that was out, I better not say his name because I haven't asked him, but he's local here. I see him all the time at the hardware store. He was a maintenance guy for the hospital. He was out waxing the floors. Everybody's running away. All the nurses, everybody's running away. So, not him. So he stopped what he was doing. There's a gunfight going on, and ran to it. And he helped our deputy pry that gun out of his hand. Now, keep in mind, when he's trying to get the gun out of our deputy's hand, he's reaching down and taking bites out of our deputy's arm and spitting him out and taking another bite, taking chunks out of his arm. He's hitting him over the head, top of the head with his own gun, blood running down his head. Not going well. And he comes in, and he doesn't know, the maintenance guy does not know a lot about guns. But he said, we interviewed him right here in the same room, Royal, like Amy and I did, right? Mm-hmm. And he said, but I know where the bang switch is at. And I know if I put my finger behind it, it can't go bang. so that's what I did. I put my finger behind it, and just before he did that, he fired another round, and it hit the monitor. And and the monitor stopped the bullet, or it would have hit this guy in the pelvic girdle. And then he got his finger behind the trigger.
Do we know what kind of gun it was?
It was a 1911. So he was our detective or detention deputy was carrying his off-duty gun.
Okay, so then he probably wouldn't be able to get his finger behind the trigger. He's talking about the hammer?
Oh, no, it wasn't that. No, you're right. It couldn't have been his 1911. It would have had to have been his Glock. You're right. I didn't think about that. I just know that he carried that as off-duty, and he wasn't in uniform at the time. So, yeah.
So what was the outcome? What are the outcome of that?
Well, the outcome of that is then he went back. Everybody.
So they were able to subdue him?
Medical attention. Oh, yeah.
The bad guy didn't get shot?
No.
Okay.
Because the gun didn't go off again, then our deputy was able to pry that gun out of his hand. I remember him, Deputy Shira, saying, he pointed it at him and said, if you move, I'm going to shoot you a lot. Yeah. And he didn't, as he did in my incident.
Yeah.
He claims schizophrenia. I disagree with that because he knows what a gun pointed at him means. Yeah. So he stopped. And, from that, those two incidences were adjudicated, or the penalty from the adjudication was lumped together. So he got 30 to 40. He's in Boise State Prison right now.
Yeah. So I want to back up to the original incident, the shooting at your home. So you handcuffed the bad guy. What happens after that? Did you have interactions with your kids at that point?
I told them verbally. I just told them to stay down and stay where they're at. It was okay. Dad's okay.
Were they your kids crying? What was their...
Nope, they were not crying. They weren't. And the only interaction I had with Dirtbag was, I'll use Dirtbag on this podcast if you oppose that. Sorry, it is what it is, man. At the time, I asked how many there were. He said, it's just me. I said, keep your head down, don't move. And he did exactly what I said. The only other words he said to me was after support got there and the EMTs were working on him, I was walking out to the ambulance. They took me by ambulance. I was walking out to the ambulance, and that's where he looked at me and said, that'll teach you to wage a war on drugs. And that's when they put the blanket up because the kids were walking by. Yeah. Kids did great. They weren't even crying at all. Mm-hmm. People think, oh my gosh, how'd the kids do? The kids were amazing. They saw a psychologist for 3 visits. And the psychologist was like, you know what? They seem like they're okay. And they would ask him questions like, what do you think? Do you lay awake and think of, bad people coming to get you? I said, no, Dad'll take care of it. And Dad's like, holy smokes, like, I'm in almost code black, right? And but kids are just so resilient. The thing I didn't know is Amy and I were talking to my daughter, who's now 21, a year ago. And she told me, okay, so the shooting happens. I'm sitting at the kitchen table. They're bandaging my arm. The kids go out. I look at my daughter in the eyes. And I said, Dakota, it's okay. I'll see you in a little bit. They're going to take you to safe place, and I'll see you in a few hours or in the morning. I looked at her in the eye. She told us, Amy and I, a year ago, that until she saw me the next morning at 10 o'clock, she thought I was dead.
Wow.
Now, how could that be? I looked at her in the eye. I talked to her. Yeah. And her memory, so it has some effect. A critical incident, it wiped that part out in her memory. She thought I was dead until the next morning. The thing that disturbs me is she didn't seem particularly happy to see me. So, but, you know.
And then how about your other kid?
Dawson, he's 24 now, and he's in Spokane, and he's doing great. And he actually helped me build this business before he had to get a real job.
Yeah.
And oh yeah.
So talk about what happened. So you got after the shooting. The guys. You handcuffed the guy. Did you use your radio? How did you contact the
Telephone.
authority? By phone. You
By
called
phone.
your dispatch.
Yeah.
And what'd you tell your dispatch?
I told him I had been in a shooting, one suspect, multiple gunshot wounds. I've been hit, but I'm okay, but the scene's not secure. Now, why did I say that? Because they trained me to say that. That's why I said that. And then the other thing is I evaluated it later. I thought, boy, I might have been close to code black, but I don't think I was. I was able to dial the phone. I was able to hit the buttons on the phone. And here's an interesting point on training. You would think somebody in that position, myself, would dial 911. No, I didn't dial 911. I called the office number because that's what I called thousands of times before. I called the office number.
Yeah.
So they didn't ask, what's your emergency?
That's funny.
Idaho County Sheriff's Office.
So then, who was the first to arrive?
First to arrive is Tribal Officer Dan Drover, who's also a friend of mine.
And what did he do?
He came in with his long gun and provided cover. Not a medical guy. About 4 minutes after that is the second lieutenant arrived, and then medical arrived about 15 minutes after that.
Okay, so then a bad guy gets medical attention. He gets taken away by ambulance.
That's right.
And then you get taken away by ambulance as well?
Same hospital.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then what happened with you? What happened after you got taken away from the scene?
They took me to the hospital, bandaged my arm, looked at it, did some x-rays. They kept giving me updates. Now, we didn't really talk about what I'm supposed to talk about on this podcast, so I'm just going to wing it here, right? But they kept giving me updates of how he's doing. And the other guy, bad guy, right? Doug Woods. And they said his lung is collapsed. It doesn't look like we've got some bad news. His lungs collapsed, and it doesn't look like he's going to make it. And I didn't really have any thoughts to that. I didn't care one way or the other, particularly. Now, in law enforcement, what do? We shoot to change their behavior. We shoot to stop the incident. We never shoot to kill. That's not our objective. It's not even in our minds, right? But then a short time later, they came in and they said, we got some really great news. We got his lung deflated, and he's starting to stabilize. Now, at that time, I remember thinking, that was not good news to me. I didn't like that. And I felt really bad about that for a long time until people told me it was okay to feel that way at that time. Because I had some emotions going on.
So you felt angry towards him? Or how?
Yeah, I felt angry towards him, and it wasn't good news that he was... he came into my house and tried to kill me. Like, him being alive was not good news.
So it made you feel
and
vulnerable.
I wasn't angry
like
at him. Yeah, I wasn't angry at him. I was almost angry at the doctor for saying that was good news at the time. But the thing that really hit me, and Colonel Grossman helped me with this as well, is I got some buddies that were in a shooting, and they feel really bad about the shooting. They say, this guy, all the problems he had, he didn't deserve. Nobody deserves what I gave him. Now, in my shooting, I didn't feel bad. The only thing I felt bad about was not feeling bad. I felt kind of bad that I didn't feel bad. And Colonel Grossman pointed out, that's okay. It's okay. And it wasn't that I wanted anything bad to happen to him. I felt good that the training paid off and I did the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And so Grossman points out that that's what you feel good about, and that's okay. Now, some other guys, one of the guys that was supposed to be at our training today and couldn't make it because his wife's sick, he feels bad about his shooting, and that's also okay. But he feels bad about what the guy that he shot went through. He doesn't deserve that because that guy has people that love him too. I didn't feel that in my shooting. I think it's just important to keep in mind that I thought something was wrong with me because I felt really good about it. This happened at Wednesday at 6:10 p.m. I didn't sleep until Sunday at 2:00.
So you had trouble sleeping after the incident?
It's not that I had trouble sleeping. I didn't want to sleep. I felt great. And here's
So you still had the adrenaline going.
Oh man, I was like Superman. I was on top of the world. I felt wonderful. I felt good. I didn't even want to sleep. And then I crashed at 2:00 on Sunday. My body finally shut down.
So how long was it before you slept?
Sunday at 2:00.
So how many days was that?
That'd be Wednesday night. I'd slept. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 3 days and a few hours. 4 days and a few hours. Thursday,
You had
Friday,
no,
Saturday,
No
Sunday.
sleep at all, not even a nap?
Not even a nap. I would sit down and I would like lose time. So could have maybe been a nap. I would kind of lose the time. The time continuum was a little bit messed up in my mind, but I just remember feeling so good. I felt great, and then later, I felt so bad that I felt so good. So that was a weird dynamic.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
There's a weird dynamic for me. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. So go back to, so you go to the hospital, you get treated, things are starting to slow down. Tell me a little bit about the investigation side of it. How were you treated during the investigation? And what was that process?
I think I was treated very well. I've heard horror stories. They take everything, including your boots. They took my stuff, and I knew they were going to, but I was also prepared for that. My gun was gone for 7 years. I got it back now. I was treated better than what I expected at the time. And given how hard this scenario seems because it was in my house, I think I had it very easy compared to a lot of guys that are in shootings. Because the decision making of if you have the things you need to be authorized in deadly force and using deadly force, that was an easy decision for me. I didn't have a lot of public around. It wasn't a domestic where the guy's reaching in a bag or he's reaching in his waistband. I didn't have any of that. So the decision-making part was very, very easy for me. I feel like I got off easy. Yeah. I actually interviewed people that have been in prolonged gunfights because this was over in seconds.
But what was the process for you? What kind of process did the agency put you through? Like the agency I worked for, right? They have a CITF. CITF shows up, Critical Incident Task Force, what that stands for. It's just a group of detectives from different agencies that have created a task force, and they come out and investigate. They show up on scene, CSI shows up, they take, typically the officer's been involved to a specific location, and he sits there and waits with his escort officer, who, his choice of an officer, and then they hang out there, detectives show up, usually that's when they take your clothing, they'll give you a new gun, they take your gun, and then they have, they typically wait 24 to 48 hours, and then they'll do an interview with you. So is that something that your agency did?
No, none of that stuff. That sounds kind of nice. I actually stayed at a friend's house after I got out of the hospital. They came back and collected evidence. I believe it was the next day, and they cut chunks out of the wall and did all the investigation stuff. They took my clothes and my gun and stuff that next day. Nobody gave me another gun. I never felt like, and this is not good advice, so don't mistake this. I never felt like I needed an attorney through this process. To me, it was so clear in my mind. And I might have been, and I think the evidence was very clear. I thought it was until about a year later when I was in court and I started to question that. But it ended up being okay. If I had to go through this again, I would either request an attorney or demand an attorney. I would have an attorney. I didn't feel like I needed one. I was hanging out there by myself, and I think I was very fortunate to come through this as well as I did on that end, because his story in court was very different than what happened.
Yeah.
And
well, that's good advice. I agree with you. I think it's good to have an attorney.
Yeah. And I was very naive at the time, and I thought I did the right thing, and it was the farthest thing from my mind that I needed an attorney. I would never go through that again without an attorney.
Yeah. Was your shooting considered an on-duty shooting, or was it considered an off-duty shooting?
It would have technically been an on-duty shooting because I went on call at 6:00.
Okay.
And this happened at 6:10. So, I don't know if that's written down anywhere. I think of it as an off-duty shooting because I was in my sweats and I didn't have shoes on. My kids were in the same room, right?
Yeah.
But technically, I guess I would have been on duty. So, yeah.
Well, your shooting's pretty unique shooting compared to, like, say, all the guys I'm interviewing. They're typically on duty, as in they're in full uniform and a patrol car responding to a call for service. So it's pretty unique. I think it's a good reminder to guys, especially, the agency I retired from, guys have take-home cars, your car's parked in the front driveway. People know that you're a cop, and not everybody likes cops, right? So it's a good reminder, and I think a good reminder to carry your gun off duty.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to, anything you want to add to anything that we've talked about? Any advice you want to put out there to guys?
Just to reiterate that mental conditioning, man, that's, just like you've got to be mentally prepared. There's bad, everybody, like cops know there's bad people out there, but they're capable of horrible things, and nothing's off limits. Just because you think they can't come into your house and kill your kids, you think they won't take your wife and take her to a place and rape her and then let her live, because that's worse than, I think about that stuff all the time. If somebody wants to get to me, they could just kill me with a sniper rifle when I walk out, and I'm not ever going to know the difference. If they really want to get to me, they'll do bad things to my wife. They'll do bad things to my kids. People the things that we cherish more than anything else. And will they do that to meet their objective? Absolutely, they'll do that. And we need to fight and train. Our training and our motivation has to be better than theirs. And the hard part about that is, Raul, that day will probably never come statistically. Look at the statistics, especially in rural counties. That day's probably never going to come. So we're preparing for a day that will likely never come.
Yeah, right. You look at some of the big cities where they have more off-ball shootings more often, but it's changing in Idaho.
It's changing.
It's changing.
Absolutely.
There's more off-ball shootings every year.
Every year.
Right.
Yep.
So society's mobile. I mean, somebody can commit a double homicide in one state and be in your town in a different state in just a few hours.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you just never know who you're going to run into.
It's very elementary stuff, but situational awareness.
Yeah.
Man, if we can see it coming, if we have even seconds before it happens, that's good. Maybe we won't have seconds, but we are training for a day that will statistically not going to happen to us. But that doesn't mean we have to train for it. So it's a tricky balance, man. It's a tricky balance. And you guys that are still out there on the streets, man, thank you, because I sleep very well at night, and I'm as ready for a gunfight as I was when I was on patrol, because bad things happen all the time. You talk about what just happened down in Boise. It wasn't 6 months ago, and it was a different pursuit. But the guy ended up going down a road, much like ours, the next house over, half a mile from here, and ended up in a nice couple's yard, armed and ready to fight. Now, the patrol guys were right behind him, so they didn't have to get in a gunfight that night. But it can happen to anybody. It can happen to your parents. It can happen to your grandparents. It can happen to your kids, your cousins, your nieces, all that stuff. And so I think as law enforcement also, we tend to, we get in our little world, we do, and I get it. But we can't forget about, we're out there doing our thing to protect and serve, right, for the civilians. And sometimes I think we want to keep our training to ourselves. And I've always said, if I'm getting my butt kicked, I don't care who comes to help me. So that's one of the things we're doing here at AFD, is trying to responsibly arm people, because we got farmers around here that think they're going to shoot everybody that walks into the house. They don't get it. They need education. So we just need to make sure we keep people educated.
Yeah, and for law enforcement officers, well, anybody who carries a gun, right, you just need to make sure that we're trained properly.
Yeah.
And you got to be ready for those high-risk, low-frequency events.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so I think we've covered everything we need to cover. Very interesting. Like I say, I really enjoyed listening to your story. I remember years ago, what year did this happen?
It happened in 2005. Or it was 2007. Sorry,
2007. I remember working down in the in the Treasure Valley and seeing it in the news, seeing about this incident. I remember going, man, I'd sure like to interview that guy sometime. I'd like to hear his perspective.
Well, cool.
And then you show up in one of my classes, and now here we are. So
Now we're retired and we actually
yeah.
have time to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I appreciate you telling your story. I'm hoping this is going to help other guys. And so thanks a lot.
You bet, man. Thanks for coming up. We'd love to have you here. Thank you.
All right.